Hi, folks. It's the off week, shall we say, or maybe it's the on week. I don't know. It's the episode just with me with some brief reflections about my topic of the week. And my topic for this week is governance calendars. I think they are such an important yet slightly unloved tool for governance. Before I roll into the conversation today, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I record. I am on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge any First Nations people who may be listening or watching to this podcast today. I acknowledge their continuing connections to land, waters, skies, culture, and country. As I know I've said before, I support voice, treaty and truth for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in Australia, and I encourage others in the Take On Board community to do the same. Now, let's dive on into the topic. As I said at the start of the year, every second episode, at least for the next 6 months or so, is going to be a shorter episode with just me talking about my governance geek topic of the week. And my governance geek topic of the week for this week is governance calendars. This is partly front of mind for me because I have just commenced, or we, I should say, have just commenced the Take On Board Accelerator program for 2026. We have 31 fabulous people joining us in the program this year, and the topic for the first session is always governance calendars. So they've been on my mind a lot this week. There's been lots of talk and reflection about them. Now, a governance calendar, most boards have a governance calendar, although it's not always visible. I'll come to that in a moment. And essentially, it is just kind of a calendar, a table. It might be an Excel spreadsheet, but it is, the board meetings across the top, so each of the different dates. And then down the side, you have all of the different topics that you might need to talk about over the year, or maybe 2 years or 3 years. I'll talk about that in a moment too. And you just allocate them out. The May meeting will talk about this, at the August meeting, we'll talk about that. That's a governance calendar. Not all boards have them. I strongly encourage you to have one if you don't. I strongly encourage you that if you haven't seen the board calendar for your organisation, that you ask for it. Ask the chair, ask the secretary, ask whoever it may be, whether you've got one. If you do, if you can see it, and if you don't, maybe why not? And you might want to help in putting it together. I, even for one of the boards that I'm on, have it stuck up on the wall next to me. This is not the full governance calendar, but it gives me all of my board meeting dates, all of the committee meeting dates, the strategy dates, and so on. And then what sits below that is the different topics that happen at each board meeting. So in the show notes, I'm going to provide a couple of resources, and they are the resources that I provide to the groups. So there is an AICD article, annual board calendar, and there is a template, I guess, board calendar covering a whole bunch of things: strategy, budget, CEO oversight, monitoring and supervision, and so on. There is a template provided by CAA. I'm not even sure what that stands for, but anyway, CAA, which also, they do theirs slightly differently. As I'd initially said, it dates down the side and then what is required at each of those board meetings. And there is one by an organisation called Effective Governance, which, likewise has the meeting schedule, the strategy formulation, strategy implementation, and so on. It is worth looking at a couple of different ones. There is also one, the Institute of Community Directors Australia also has a governance calendar. Theirs is, well, shall we say, very comprehensive. So if you've never seen a governance calendar before, I'm not sure you want to start with theirs, because it is this magnificent but slightly overwhelming spreadsheet of all the possible things you could possibly have on your governance calendar. So it's a little overwhelming if you haven't done much work before. But it is worth looking at. I will also put a link to the ICDA in the show notes. And again, I may have said this before, but if you're in Australia, particularly if you're on a not-for-profit board, the membership of the ICDA is free. Strongly recommended. So that's what a governance calendar is. That's some of the resources that might help you out. Now, let me share with you, I guess, some of the insights when we had the conversation in the groups about governance calendars, some of the things that kind of stood out about why they're important. So Overall, it was really about the strategic value of a governance calendar, that it provides the strategic and compliance foundation. It's the board work plan, essentially, and it ensures a planned approach to both compliance obligations and strategic conversations. It provides evidence, if it's needed, to, any courts or whatever it may be, but even just to your co-directors, that directors have taken reasonable steps to fulfill all of their duties. It also provides, or should provide, visibility and shared ownership. It should be visible to the entire board, maybe in your, I'm on Diligent for some of the boards, but it could be whatever platform you're on, or even just your Google Share Drive or whatever it may be. So whatever platform it is you use to share your papers, it should be visible there in something like a foundations folder so that everybody can see it. And it should be shared beyond just the chair and the CEO, or the chair and the company secretary, or whoever it may be. That helps to mitigate, I guess, the risk of the board being overly dependent on just the chair, just the co-sec, or whatever it is to drive the agenda. Thirdly, along with it, that visibility and shared ownership, it should be a living document. It shouldn't be one of those things that you set and forget and just repeat for the year after. That's what we did last year. That's what we'll do this year. It's come up on the board calendar to approve the board calendar. Yep, done and dusted. Off we go. There really should be some conscious review of the governance calendar and whether it's suiting your current purpose. And in particular, think about your current strategy. So if you've recently reviewed your strategy, it's a good time to review your governance calendar. The other real value, strategic value that comes from a good calendar is that, well, it's an anti-frazzle tool. It means that you can be a bit more relaxed, hopefully, that everything is being literally ticked off. It's a central, clear calendar. It stops the shifting of dates, or minimises the shifting of dates. It shows how subcommittees, so there might be some layering, subcommittee work can align with board work, particularly when you've got things like annual general meetings. So, side note, you should have those key events on your governance calendar as well and work backwards. So we need our finalised accounts done by the AGM, therefore the board needs to approve it by this time, therefore the finance committee needs to approve it by this time. All of those things should be aligned through the board calendar and through the committee calendars. Which is the final point. It could be a layered, if this makes sense, a layered one-pager. So it could be a spreadsheet. The top sheet is the board calendar, and then you layer below for the finance, risk and audit, however that is put together, committee, or the people and culture committee, or the governance committee, or whatever it may be. So you can layer it with all of those other details and timelines. So they are the key things, I think, that came out of the conversation. Strategic and compliance foundation, visibility and shared ownership. It's a living document. It reduces frazzle, and it can be layered. But there was a whole lot of other points as well, so I'm going to share some of those. One of the things that was raised was that a governance calendar, I mean, you think about a calendar, you think it's 12 months, but it doesn't have to be 12 months. You could have a 3-year calendar, and year 1, you're looking at the new strategy, and year 2, you're looking at, I don't know, whatever you're deep diving into. In year 3, you're looking at, I don't know, year 2 could be the implementation of a transformation, and year 3 could be how that comes about. So it doesn't have to be a 1-year calendar. You don't have to have everything on the calendar every year. You might meter that out over 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it may be. Secondly, that things to think about. The calendar allows proactivity around a number of points, yet it should also be flexible. So it shifts when there's critical items, when there's risks that come up, when there's urgent issues. So it shouldn't be set in stone. Thirdly, it really allows a board to block out that strategic thinking space, dedicated time to have a deep dive into whatever issues are important. And that can also, as a corollary, provide some connection time for board directors as well. Thirdly, I'm up to fourthly, I think. Anyway, another point, it manages the lumpiness. So you get to see where the big meetings are and where the meetings that are a bit lighter on, and you can hopefully massage things around so that the heavy meetings, well, So you can balance it out, basically. It was also talked about that your governance calendar can actually be a useful tool to use both in recruitment, sharing it with prospective board members, and in induction, sharing it with new board members who are coming on and giving them some context around how it's all come together. And it provides everybody with clarity. I think I've said that in a number of different ways, but it just provides clarity. So for me, part of what I love about the Take on Board Accelerator groups is obviously it's for the group learning, but it obviously also provides me with some learning and some thinking. So the reflections that I've come away with after these conversations this week are that for one of the boards on, I think I've shared this, I have just become the chair. Well, late last year became the chair. And I've been on that board for 6 years and I've just become the chair. And what I thought about at the time that I'm quite frankly, literally now thinking I might revise slightly was we've got a pretty solid governance foundation. Let's just leave it in place for 12 months and then review it after that. My thoughts now are that even though I've been on the board for 6 years, even though I've seen the governance calendar before, when I looked at it as the chair, that's my fresh eyes for it. And that in 12 months' time, I might not have chair fresh eyes anymore. So I'm actually going to look at the governance calendar with fresh eyes, with a not throw it all out and start again approach, but just see where some tweaks can be made rather than waiting 12 months. Because I think I will get more value out of doing that now, and hopefully the board will get more value out of me looking at it in that way now than waiting for 12 months. So that was one thing that I'm going to do. Secondly, it reminded me, and it will be part of the review, to schedule in some deep dives at that board. We've done it before, but we haven't done it recently, and I think it's something that we need to do. And thirdly, we have some new board directors coming on soon and our new board observer. We have the induction coming up in a couple of weeks, so I'm going to use their fresh eyes as well to see what they can see in the governance calendar, in the committee calendars that might be able to be picked up. So, yeah, that's my actions. I might even come back and tell you how that went once I've done them. That will take a little bit of time for me to do, probably over the next couple of months or so. So, folks, yeah, I encourage you to have a look at your board calendar. Don't just flick past it in the board papers and go, yep, that's the board calendar. It's all done. I encourage you to have a look at it, to try and have a fresh eyes look at it, to pay attention to it and give it a little bit of love and see what tweaks might need to be made. If you're not the chair or the secretary, it doesn't mean you can't have a conversation with the chair or the secretary about some suggestions you might have. They'll probably be rapt that somebody's taken the time to have a look at it. So, yeah, take a look at your governance calendar, create one if you don't have one, review it if you do have one, and make sure on the governance calendar is a review of the governance calendar that is done as a conscious, good process rather than just assuming it's all going to be fine and dandy. All right, folks, that's it for this week. We'll see you next week for another interview. See you soon.